Picture this, it's February 1870, and you're a cowboy on a cattle drive through Wyoming territory. The temperature has dropped to 30 degrees. The wind is cutting through you like a knife, and you're 200 miles from the nearest town. You have no heated shelter, no electric blankets, no modern camping gear, just you, your horse, and whatever you could carry in your saddlebags. In 6 hours, when the temperature drops another 20 degrees, you'll either be alive, or you'll be a frozen corpse that won't be found until spring. So, how the hell did cowboys survive nights that should have killed them in hours? The answer will destroy everything you thought you knew about human survival. These men didn't just live through deadly winters. They developed techniques so shocking, so extreme, and so effective that when modern military survival experts discovered them, they couldn't believe they actually worked. But here's the truth that will chill you to the bone. More cowboys died from freezing than from gunfights, stampedes, and Indian raids combined. Winter wasn't just harsh on the frontier. It was a serial killer that claimed thousands of lives every year. And the men who survived did things that would be considered insane by today's standards. We're about to reveal 14 survival secrets so brutal and bizarre that some were banned by trail bosses for being too dangerous. Others saved lives in ways that seem impossible, and one technique was so extreme that the men who used it were nicknamed the Walking Dead, but they lived when everyone else died. By the end of this video, you'll understand why these cowboys were the most indestructible human beings who ever walked the earth. But I'm warning you now, some of these survival methods will make you question everything you thought you knew about the limits of human endurance. The winter that killed thousands. Before we dive into these shocking techniques, you need to understand what these men were facing. The winter of 1870-1871 wasn't just cold, it was apocalyptic. Temperatures in Montana territory hit 47 degrees Celsius and stayed there for weeks. Snow fell continuously for 30 days. Entire herds of 10,000 cattle froze standing up, creating fields of ice-covered corpses that stretched to the horizon. But here's what makes this story absolutely incredible. Cowboys were still working, cattle drives didn't stop, ranches needed tending, and men needed wages, no matter how many of them died trying to earn them. Now remember Tom Frozen Face Morrison, the cowboy I mentioned who got his nickname from permanent frostbite damage? What I didn't tell you is why he never missed a day of work, even with half his face dead from cold. His secret was so disturbing that other cowboys called him crazy. But when the killing winter of 1870 ended, Morrison was alive and rich while hundreds of others were buried in frozen ground. That secret? We'll reveal it in technique number 8. And trust me, you won't see it coming. Technique number 1, the buddy system that shocked trail bosses. The first survival secret sounds innocent until you understand how extreme it really was. Cowboys would share bedrolls, but not the way you think. In deadly cold, 3 or even 4 grown men would strip completely naked and pile into a single bedroll, skin to skin, rotating positions every hour to prevent anyone from freezing. They called it spooning for survival, and there was zero shame about it because the alternative was death. But here's the part that shows how desperate things got. The rotation system wasn't random. The coldest man always went in the middle, surrounded by the warmest bodies. If someone was showing signs of hypothermia, the entire group would sacrifice their comfort to keep that person alive. Jack Stevens, a trail boss from Texas, wrote in his journal, "Billy was turning blue and couldn't stop shaking. We stripped him down and wrapped him between me and the Mexican boy. By morning, Billy was pink as a baby, but we all looked like we'd been wrestling with the devil." The body heat from multiple naked bodies could raise bedroll temperature by 60 degrees. In 30-degree conditions, that meant the difference between waking up alive or becoming a frozen statue. But wait, this innocent-sounding technique actually had a dark side that killed more cowboys than it saved. And the reason why will shock you when we get to technique number 9. Technique number 2, the horse heat method, and why it was banned. Here's where things get truly desperate. Cowboys would strip down and sleep pressed naked against their horses for warmth. A horse's body temperature runs about 101 degrees, and their thick winter coats create natural furnaces. A cowboy could position himself along the horse's belly or flank, using the animal as a living heater that could keep him alive through the night. But this technique was so dangerous that some trail bosses banned it outright. Horses can kick with 2,000 pounds of force. They can roll over in their sleep. And if a spooked horse decided to run in the middle of the night, a naked cowboy tied to its side would be dragged to death across frozen ground. Cookie Williams, a chuck wagon cook from Montana, used this method for 15 winters and claimed he could tell the exact temperature by how close his horse wanted him. When Buttercup tried to lay on top of me, I knew we were both gonna die if I didn't do something extreme. That something extreme was technique number 7, and it's so shocking that it sounds like something from a horror movie. But first, let me tell you about the technique that actually killed more cowboys than it saved. Technique number 3. The fire pit death trap. Cowboys would dig pits under their bedrolls and fill them with burning coals to create heated sleeping areas. Sounds smart, right? Wrong. This technique was responsible for more cowboy deaths than any other survival method. Here's why. If you miscalculated the heat, you'd literally cook yourself alive while sleeping. Too little dirt covering the coals, and you'd wake up with third-degree burns across your entire body. But here's the truly horrifying part. Some cowboys would wake up to the smell of their own flesh cooking and discover they were paralyzed from carbon monoxide poisoning. They'd lie there, conscious and aware, slowly burning to death. The technique required perfect calculation. Heat the ground to exactly 130 degrees, hot enough for warmth, not hot enough to kill. 1 degree too hot, and you'd die in agony. 1 degree too cold, and you'd freeze. Burning Bill. Mackenzie got his nickname after surviving a fire pit accident that should have killed him. Half his back was covered in permanent scars, but he claimed it was still better than freezing to death. But the masters of this technique discovered something even more terrifying, and it's coming up in Technique 11. Technique number 4. The whiskey furnace. The method that created legends. Cowboys used alcohol as internal heating fuel, but not the way you think. They would consume exact amounts of high-proof whiskey at precisely timed intervals to maintain core body temperature throughout the night. Too much, and alcohol's blood-thinning effects would kill you faster than cold. Too little, and you'd freeze anyway. The technique was called stoking the furnace, and it required mathematical precision that would impress modern scientists. 1 shot of 100-proof whiskey consumed 30 minutes before sleep would raise core temperature by 4 degrees for exactly 3 hours. A second shot, consumed when you woke up naturally, usually around 2 a.m., would carry you through until dawn. But here's what made this technique legendary. Cowboys who mastered it could work in conditions that killed other men. They became known as winter ghosts because they seemed immune to cold that would drop normal people in minutes. Whiskey Tom Patterson worked the northern ranges for 20 years and never lost a finger or toe to frostbite. His secret? He'd calculated his alcohol tolerance down to the exact milliliter needed for different temperatures. But the most extreme practitioners took this technique to levels that sound impossible, and you'll discover that method in Technique 12. Technique number 5. The heated stone torture device. Cowboys would heat stones in fires and use them as body warmers, but the preparation process was more like medieval torture than survival technique. First, they had to find the perfect stones. Too porous, and they'd explode from steam pressure, sending red-hot fragments into your flesh. Too dense, and they'd crack from thermal shock, creating razor-sharp heated projectiles. The heating process took 6 hours. The stones had to reach exactly 180 degrees, hot enough to stay warm all night, not hot enough to burn through cloth and skin while you slept. But here's the part that shows how extreme this got. Cowboys would test stone temperature by pressing them against their bare arms for exactly 3 seconds. If they could hold contact that long without screaming, the temperature was perfect. Stone Face Rodriguez earned his nickname from permanent burn scars across his cheek from a stone that was too hot. But he claimed those scars saved his life because the burns created scar tissue that was immune to frostbite. The most experienced stone heaters could prepare 8-10 stones of different sizes, strategically placed throughout their bedrolls to create microclimates of warmth. But even the experts sometimes made fatal mistakes. Wait until you hear about the cowboy who developed a stone heating technique so advanced it seems impossible. That's coming in Technique 13. Technique number 6. The buffalo coat armor and its deadly secret. Cowboys wore buffalo hide coats that weighed 30 pounds and could keep them alive in 60 degrees temperatures. But these coats came with a hidden danger that killed dozens of men. Buffalo fur is so effective at insulation that it can actually trap too much heat. Cowboys would overheat during physical activity, start sweating, and then when they stopped moving, the trapped moisture would freeze against their skin, creating a layer of ice that would kill them from the inside out. The technique for wearing buffalo coats required constant monitoring of body temperature and strategic venting to prevent deadly moisture buildup. Cowboys developed specific movements and clothing adjustments that had to be performed every 15 minutes during active work. But here's the shocking part. The heaviest buffalo coats were worn by the smallest cowboys. Larger men generated too much body heat and would cook themselves alive inside the insulation. Tiny Thompson, A 5'4" cowboy from Colorado wore a 40-pound buffalo coat and claimed he could sleep naked in it during 40-degree nights. But his coat preparation ritual took 2 hours every evening and involved techniques that sound like black magic. That ritual? You'll learn it in Technique Number 14, and it's the most extreme survival preparation you've ever heard of. But first, let me tell you about the technique that was so dangerous it was banned by most trail bosses. Before we reveal the most extreme survival methods these cowboys used, if you're shocked by how far these men went to stay alive, smash that like button and subscribe with notifications on. Because we're uncovering survival techniques so extreme, they'll change how you think about human limits forever. Trust me, the techniques coming next are so brutal and bizarre that modern survival experts refuse to teach them, but they worked when nothing else would. Technique number 7. The snow cave tomb, where men went to die. Cowboys would build snow caves that were actually death traps disguised as shelters. The technique required digging into hillsides or large snowdrifts. But here's the terrifying part. You had to build it perfectly, or it would become your tomb. Too small, and you'd suffocate from carbon dioxide poisoning. Too large, and you'd freeze to death anyway. The walls had to be exactly the right thickness. Too thin, and they'd collapse, burying you alive. Too thick, and the insulation wouldn't work. Cowboys would test wall thickness by pressing their fist against them. If the wall gave more than 2 inches, it was too thin and would kill you. But here's what made this technique truly horrifying. Cowboys would intentionally build the entrance lower than the sleeping area, creating a cold trap. If you built it wrong, cold air would flow in and pool around your body, freezing you while you slept. Charlie Snow King Mackenzie survived 6 days in a snow cave during the blizzard of 1873, but when rescuers found him, he was delirious and speaking to people who weren't there. The isolation and sensory deprivation had nearly driven him insane. His cave was found to be a masterpiece of survival engineering. Multiple chambers, perfect ventilation, and heated sleeping areas. But Mackenzie never revealed how he'd built it, claiming he couldn't remember anything from those 6 days. Technique number 8. The Grease Man Method. Why Frozen Face Morrison never died. Remember Tom Frozen Face Morrison? Here's his disturbing secret. He would smear animal fat over his entire body every night, creating a waterproof, insulating layer that made him look like a walking corpse. But not just any animal fat. Morrison used bear grease mixed with pine resin and something else, something he never told anyone about. Other cowboys said he smelled like death itself, but he never got frostbite again after that first injury. The technique required applying the grease in specific patterns and thicknesses. Too much on your face, and you'd suffocate. Too little on your extremities and they'd freeze anyway. Morrison could apply his grease coating in complete darkness and have it perfect every time. But here's the part that terrified other cowboys. Morrison's grease mixture would preserve his body heat so effectively that snow wouldn't melt when it touched him. He could walk through a blizzard and emerge completely dry. Other cowboys tried to copy his technique, but without knowing his secret ingredient, they'd either freeze to death anyway or suffocate from blocked pores. Morrison took his formula to his grave. Technique number 9, the human furnace rotation. Why the buddy system failed. Remember the buddy system I mentioned earlier? Here's why it actually killed more cowboys than it saved. When multiple men shared body heat, they would create a rotation system to ensure everyone stayed warm. But the rotation timing was critical, too frequent, and nobody would get warm enough. Too infrequent, and the outer men would freeze to death. The perfect rotation was every 47 minutes. Nobody knew why this exact timing worked, but deviating from it even by 5 minutes could be fatal. But here's the horrifying secret. The rotation system created a hierarchy of survival. The strongest men would unconsciously position themselves in the warmest spots, while weaker men would end up in the outer positions where they'd slowly freeze to death. Trail crews would wake up to find 1 or 2 men frozen solid, still in position, but dead for hours. The survivors would have to continue the rotation system with corpses until morning, because moving dead bodies would destroy the heat distribution and kill everyone else. Dead Man Johnson got his nickname because he survived 3 different nights sleeping next to frozen corpses, maintaining the rotation system that kept the living men alive. Technique number 10, the hypothermia resurrection ritual. Cowboys developed a technique for reviving men who appeared to be dead from hypothermia, and it worked even when the person had no detectable pulse or breathing. The ritual involved stripping the hypothermic person completely naked and placing them between 2 warm bodies in a specific position, one warm body against their back one against their front, with arms and legs interlocked to maximize skin contact. But here's the shocking part. The revival process could take 6 to 8 hours, during which the dead person would remain unconscious and appear lifeless. The warm bodies had to maintain the position without moving, essentially becoming human hot water bottles for an entire night. The technique required precise temperature control. Too much heat too fast would cause cardiac arrest. Too little heat, and the person would actually die. Cowboys learned to judge the exact amount of warmth needed by monitoring barely detectable changes in skin color. Lazarus. Pete got his nickname after being revived from hypothermic death 4 different times. He claimed he could remember being dead, floating above his body, watching the other cowboys work to save him. Modern medical science has confirmed that this technique can actually work, but only under very specific conditions that cowboys somehow figured out through trial and error. Technique number 11, the underground furnace system, the secret of the fire pit masters. Remember the fire pit technique that killed so many cowboys? The masters developed an advanced version that was pure engineering genius. Instead of heating the ground directly, they would create underground furnace systems, networks of connected pits with air channels that could heat large areas safely and efficiently. The system involved digging multiple connected chambers underground with carefully calculated airflow patterns that would distribute heat evenly without creating dangerous hotspots or carbon monoxide buildup. But here's what made this technique legendary. The underground furnaces could stay hot for 3 to 4 days from a single initial fire. Cowboys could heat an entire campsite and keep it warm for nearly a week. The construction took 12 to 15 hours of precise digging and stone placement. The angles of the air channels had to be mathematically perfect, or the entire system would fail catastrophically. Only 3 cowboys were ever known to master this technique. They became famous throughout the frontier as the fire builders, and trail bosses would pay them enormous sums to create heated campsites for winter cattle drives. Technique number 12. The alcohol blood replacement theory. The most extreme alcohol technique involved consuming specific amounts of different types of alcohol in calculated sequences throughout the night to maintain a constant internal heating effect. Cowboys would start with whiskey for immediate warming, switch to rum for sustained heat, and finish with pure grain alcohol for emergency temperature boost. The timing and quantities had to be perfect, or the combination would kill you. But here's the part that sounds impossible. Master practitioners could maintain their core body temperature at exactly 98.6 degrees C, even in 40 degrees C conditions, just through precise alcohol consumption timing. Chemical Pete Martinez could work shirtless in sub-zero temperatures for hours without showing any signs of cold distress. Other cowboys said his breath was so alcoholic it would burn your eyes, but he never showed signs of intoxication. The technique required building alcohol tolerance over years and understanding how different alcohol types affected your body chemistry. One mistake in timing or quantity would result in alcohol poisoning or freezing to death. Technique number 13, the stone matrix heat system. The most advanced heated stone technique involved creating geometric patterns of stones with different heat capacities and placement positions to create sustained warmth zones. Master stone heaters would prepare 15-20 stones of different materials and sizes, heating them to different temperatures and placing them in calculated positions that would create overlapping heat fields lasting 10-12 hours. The stone patterns were based on mathematical principles that cowboys discovered through experimentation. Certain geometric arrangements would amplify heat retention, while others would create heat dead zones that could kill you. Professor Williams earned his nickname by creating stone heating patterns so complex they looked like ancient ritual circles. His heated sleeping areas could maintain temperatures 40 degrees warmer than ambient air all night long. But the knowledge of these patterns died with the men who created them. Modern scientists have tried to recreate these geometric heating systems and failed to achieve the same results. Technique number 14, the buffalo coat ritual of survival. The most extreme buffalo coat preparation involved a 2-hour nightly ritual that prepared both the coat and the wearer for survival in impossible conditions. The ritual began with coating the inside of the buffalo hide with specific animal fat mixtures applied in precise patterns. Different areas of the coat received different fat treatments, based on their position relative to the wearer's body. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. Cowboys would actually alter their own body chemistry before putting on the coat. They would consume specific combinations of foods and substances that would change their body odor, sweat composition, and heat generation patterns. Ritual Roberts could prepare himself and his buffalo coat in a way that would keep him alive in 50-degree C temperatures, while other men died in 20-degree C conditions wearing similar coats. The preparation involved mental conditioning techniques that sound like meditation or prayer. Cowboys claimed the ritual put them in a trance-like state that allowed them to control their body temperature through willpower alone. Roberts never taught his ritual to anyone else, claiming it was too dangerous for men who weren't ready. He died during a blizzard in 1891, taking his knowledge with him. The winter that proved everything. The ultimate test of these techniques came during the Winter of Death in 1873, the worst winter on record in the American West. Temperatures dropped to 55 degrees and stayed there for 3 months. Entire settlements were wiped out. Supply lines were cut for 6 months, and over 2,000 people died from cold. But here's the incredible part. Cattle crews that knew these survival techniques not only survived, they thrived. When rescue parties finally reached them in spring, they were found alive, healthy, and still working. The difference wasn't luck or better equipment. It was this knowledge. These men had unlocked the secrets of surviving in conditions that should have killed any human being. Why this knowledge vanished forever? These survival techniques weren't just forgotten. They were deliberately abandoned when the frontier closed and modern heating became available. By 1900, the need for extreme cold survival had disappeared. The last cowboys who knew these techniques died in the early 1900s, and their knowledge died with them. But modern survival experts are discovering references to these techniques in old journals and letters, and when they try to recreate them, they're amazed by how effective they actually were. The tragic irony is that we have vastly superior equipment today, but far inferior knowledge. These cowboys could survive conditions that would kill modern survival experts in hours, using nothing but observation, experimentation, and absolute determination. The legacy of impossible survival. These techniques represent more than just survival methods. They're proof that human beings can adapt to absolutely anything if failure means death. These cowboys didn't just survive winter, they conquered it. They continued working, maintained their herds, and pushed human civilization into regions that seemed uninhabitable. Their methods were extreme because extreme conditions demanded extreme solutions. They proved that when survival is the only option, humans can develop capabilities that seem superhuman, and perhaps most importantly, they demonstrated that the difference between life and death often comes down to knowledge, preparation, and the absolute refusal to quit. Modern survival reality. Many of these techniques are too extreme for modern use, but the principles behind them are still valid. Military survival schools teach modified versions of several cowboy techniques. The buddy system for warmth is standard military training. The layering principles developed by cowboys are the foundation of modern cold weather gear, and the psychological conditioning techniques are used by special forces worldwide. But the most important lesson isn't technical, it's mental. These cowboys survived because giving up wasn't an option. They had no rescue services, no heated buildings to retreat to, no safety net of any kind. Survival was entirely in their own hands, and that absolute responsibility created men who could endure anything. The ultimate survival truth. So there you have it. 14 survival techniques so extreme they sound impossible, so effective they kept men alive in conditions that should have killed them, and so dangerous that some were banned for being too risky. These cowboys weren't superhuman. They were ordinary men who developed extraordinary abilities because their lives depended on it. They proved that with the right knowledge, preparation, and mindset, human beings can survive absolutely anything. Even death itself couldn't defeat men who refused to be defeated. Which of these survival techniques shocked you the most? And do you think modern people could develop this level of survival ability if they had to? Let us know in the comments. If you're amazed by these forgotten survival secrets, subscribe for more videos that uncover the lost knowledge that built America, because understanding how our ancestors survived the impossible can help us survive whatever challenges we face today. Next week, we're revealing the most dangerous animals cowboys faced and the shocking techniques they used to survive encounters that should have killed them instantly. Trust me, these animal attack survival stories will leave you speechless.